they look like, because there's so few of them left. I just want to mention a couple of names. I'm not a name dropper, but in this circumstance it's appropriate. I want to say these names to you now. The Hughley Spirit, the Tandara Spirit, the Alexander Spirit, the British Loyalty, the British Fidelity, the CSL Melbourne, the MV Portland, the CSL Brisbane, the CSL Thevenard. These are the vessels that have sailed over the horizon while this guy's been at the bridge of this country. He's watched them sail over the horizon on his watch. That's why we're here today. So I'd like to start the proceedings off introducing the Assistant Branch Secretary of the MUA, Joe Deacon.
Thanks, Michelle. And thanks to everyone here, the community, fellow unionists, just people passing by, interested in seeing the destruction of Australian shipping by this Prime Minister and his team of thugs. And we say a big thank you to the police as well for supporting us today. It's really good to see us here. Look, I've got to tell you, not only is it a shame that what Malcolm Turnbull and his government is doing to shipping. You know, there's seafarers here, and there's these seafarers here that are unemployed as a result of this Prime Minister and his cabinet. There's seafarers I'm staring at right now that are unemployed as a result of this Prime Minister, Michaela Cash and Co. And you know what? The MUA has had enough of it. Fellow trade unionists, Unions New South Wales and others have had enough of it. And we're saying now it's about time this Prime Minister and his cabinet either shape up or get out. Because we've had enough as a union official, along with the comrades in the Sydney Branch and around the coast. We have had a gutful of hearing these dreadful stories, seafarer stories of woe. Seafarer stories of how they're struggling to feed their kids, how they're struggling to pay their rent, let alone a mortgage. This is what's happened here when this person was allowed by the multi-shipping nationals to just turn around and decimate a whole shipping industry because of his pathological hatred for the Maritime Union of Australia. And that is to his everlasting shame. You know, if that's not bad enough, the bureaucracy in AMSA, the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, you listen to that, you know those terms, Australian Maritime Safety Authority. This bureaucratic body have just now said that they will allow unmanned vessels to float around this coast with no crew at all. No crew at all. In the old days in the Seamen's Union, we called them ghost ships. They were called ghost ships because there was no one on them. Now, not only are they rubbing these comrades' noses in the dirt by throwing them out of work and decimating a whole industry, they're now agreeing with the ruling class and the big bosses of this world to bring unmanned vessels onto this coast. Now, if that's not the most disgraceful thing you've ever seen, I don't know what is. So you know what, there's a lot of speakers after me, so I want you to just take this home with you, that the Maritime Union of Australia, contrary to what a lot of people say, we are fighting tooth and nail for these unemployed seafarers. We are fighting tooth and nail for the industry, the shipping industry that belongs to you, the Australian people, and not bureaucratic bastards like him, like Malcolm Turnbull. Thank you very much.
Whose ships? Whose ships? Whose ships? Our coast. Whose jobs? Our jobs. Whose coast? Our coast. Whose ships? Our ships. Whose jobs? Our jobs. Whose coast? Our coast. Whose ships? Our ships. Whose jobs? Our jobs.
Thanks, Joe. Coming up next, we have the Secretary of Unions New South Wales, who is always around to support us, Mark Morey. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle, and it's great to be here. But we make some noise to let Malcolm know we're here. not here, let Malcolm know we're here. It's a disgrace that we have to be here today. Here we have a government that continues to fail working people in this country. This is a government that has overseen the decimation of the car industry. This is a government that has overseen the decimation of the manufacturing industry. This is a government whose answer to unemployment is to set up drug testing in Bankstown in Sydney and persecute those people. It is a government that's cut vocational education and cut TAFE. It has cut the pathways to enable working people and people who want jobs to attain qualifications to get jobs. This is a dirty, rotten government. This is a government that doesn't care, and its actions, its continued actions are about oppressing working people, oppressing their representatives, and in particular, setting up kangaroo courts to attack unions. We know that inequality grows as unions decline, and so does this dirty, rotten government. They're doing everything they can to get rid of us. Are they going to get rid of us? No! Are we going to let them do this to us? No! Are we going to keep fighting? Yes! That's excellent. Unions New South Wales, all of our affiliates are behind the MUA. This is an important campaign. As always, the MUA are leading the charge, but they know. But the MUA knows all the unions and Unions New South Wales are behind supporting him. I congratulate you all on being here today. Speak to you all again soon.
Okay, I'm just going to move that. Sorry, coming up next we have from a retired unionist group. Now the retirees have never retired from the struggle. They're always with us at every fight. But Connie Cullen's here today. She's the auntie of a SAC seafarer and she wants to say something to you.
Everybody, you may say, what the heck is someone with white hair doing here today, female? I'm here today because my nephew, who is a seafarer, generally comes to protests. However, his mother died last week and he's busy getting things ready. Now, over a period of time, I've been quite distraught about what has happened to him. He used to be on the tankers that just go up and down the coastline and put petrol wherever they put it. And he was very, very happy. He loved that job. He did it for many, many years. Suddenly, one day, he was told, your job's going to go, mate. And he said, what have I done? What have I done? He said, it's not you, but we've got someone who will work for less money. So, without very much time at all, he suddenly didn't have a local job. Now he travels at one of those 3 weekly things, you know, you fly over to the Indian Ocean, has to go to Perth, fly up the Indian Ocean and do a similar job up there. He still doesn't get paid very well, but he's got to work. He's got a family to support, and sure, I help a bit as auntie, but, you know, there's a limit to what can be done. I cannot understand that this government cares so little about the workers. I could cry. As some of you know, for years I was a nurse, so I belong to the nurses, and I'm so happy to see so many blue tops here today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Nurses are great, and, you know, I just worry. Sure, big business is needed, but you've got to have people to work. Who's going to do the work? And if they're not given a fair deal, what's going to happen to this country? Mr. Malcolm Turnbull, please, 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 please be quiet. Please be quiet. Who knows? He may just listen to a very old lady with white hair. Listening is one thing, taking action is the next. We've got to keep fighting. We've got to save the seafarers. Why, you might say? Sure, you've got a nephew? Can I tell you that years ago I was in the Navy myself? Can I tell you my husband was a sailor? Boy, we had some fun. But I'm not going to go into that now. All I'll say to you is please, keep fighting. Keep fighting. Don't let
The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated.
Okay, up next we have a rank and file MUA Seafarer, Dan Crumlin, and Kerry Farrell's going to join him. Please come up, Kerry.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, comrades. My name's Dan Crumlin and I was a seafarer for close to 10 years. When I first got away, I remember thinking it was like winning lotto. Secure work, great wages and conditions, and the stability of full-time employment and that it brings to young workers and working families. 2 years ago, I was made redundant as a direct result of the legislative changes and the decisions made by Malcolm Turnbull and his government. I had a full year of unemployment and experienced the hardships that brings. Trying to support a young family, the stress of trying to pay the bills, pay a mortgage. My wife had to work 2 jobs and I had 2 young kids in daycare. It was an extremely difficult period. There were some very dark days. I was lucky that the union got me a job at Hutchinson Terminal down here at Port Botany and we were able to get back on track. But my story is not an isolated one, with hundreds of seafarers around the coast going from secure work one day and thrown on the scrap heap the next. Many experience and family trouble, losing houses, suffering from depression because of the actions of this government, Malcolm Turnbull and his government. Seafarers aren't the only workers under attack. As of July 1st, 700,000 workers potentially going to lose penalty rates. Internships are on the board that are going to see young workers working for slave labour of $4 per hour. Now a whole industry face the most putrid legislation I've seen in my working life in the ABCC. Inequalities at an all-time high, and Malcolm Turnbull's answer to all this: tax cuts for the rich and ramp up the attacks on the working class. We're here to tell Malcolm Turnbull we won't be competent. We'll do everything to ensure come election time we'll throw him and his government on the scrap heap as he's tried to do to us. I know the union's left no stone unturned in ensuring Australian seafarers have the opportunity to work in our own country. And as the flag says, the sign says, I can't wait till the day me and my comrades and shipmates all around the coast get to go back up that gangway. Most importantly, to the retired members, I say this: you can rest assured Australian shipping and Australian seafarers are not going away under our watch. Not with this government, not with any government. Thank you.
These ships, our ships. These jobs, our jobs. These coats, our coats. These ships, our ships. These jobs, our jobs.
Comrades, my name is Kerry Farrell. I'm proud to say that I'm a 3rd generation member of the MUA. My son's also a seafarer. I've been in this industry for 38 years. Despite having all the required certificates, medical clearances, security clearance, etc., I've not worked in 22 months. The reason I've not worked is because the Turnbull government has an ideological hatred for all union members. As most people here already know, this did not start with this current lot of ratbags. John Howard and his vandalist cronies started this dismantling of an Australian industry as soon as he was elected. He dismantled the federal government department called the Australian Maritime Industry, which erased the seafarers' engagement system and which meant that a previously industry-controlled employment system morphed into one which gave total power of employment to the ship owner and the shipper. This was not enough. They also chose to replace tax concessions for Aussie companies with incentives to foreign companies to replace Australian workers with exploited third world labour. Malcolm, Tony Abbott in a better suit, Turnbull and his mob have lowered themselves to the level of bottom feeders. This rotten government continually spruiks their commitment to jobs and growth, jobs and growth. While they say this to the electorate, they actively encourage and entice companies to physically remove hard-working Aussie seafarers often in the middle of the night. They use law enforcement officers and private security guards to forcefully evict workers in order to replace us with the exploited people paid at a pittance to do the work to which we have a moral right to do. That is carrying Australian cargo from one Australian port to another. I am proud to be a seafarer. I'm even more proud to be a member of the MUA. Woo! This lunatic government and their equally insane conservative commentary support base have always hated us. They've always salivated at the thought of reducing working class to serfs, slaves and an expendable asset which they think they own. To achieve their determined immoral aims, they target the union movement. They refer to us as thugs. In response to that insult, I say this. There are many examples, but one which comes to mind is a ship called the John Hunter, which I was on. This vessel was a coastal tanker. The crew of this ship donated thousands and thousands of dollars to the local hospital in the port of Newcastle. I find it hard to believe that the doctors, nurses and patients at that hospital would consider those fine unionists as thugs. The Liberal Party, on the other hand, is systematically cutting funding to hospitals and every other socially important service. This now constitutionally illegitimate government should be dissolved. When Barnaby takes his Akubra hat and retreats down some rabbit hole in New England, hopefully he takes that hateful witch of the West, Michaelia Cash, by the bugle and drags her down there with him. The only thugs in this story are the neoliberal arsonists who are for now at least being led by Malcolm Turnbull. This honourable member for the Cayman Islands, who is masquerading as the Prime Minister of Australia, should hang his head in shame. Australia must have a shipping industry and we deserve the right to a job. MUA here to stay.
Thanks, comrades. Thank you, Kerry and Dan, for telling your story. It's really important to hear from the people who are here to support, mate. That was great. Thank you. There's a lot of supporters here today, and I do want to recognise, and I'm certain I'm going to miss someone, but we've got AFIDA, the RTBU, ETU, I can see Teachers Federation, I can see the nurses. Who else have we got? CWU, ASU, and ITF are here. MUA veterans, of course, as well. But one of the supporters that is always with us on the road, and every time we've needed a hand, Brian Parker from the CFMEU Construction Division in New South Wales. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Michelle. Very hard act to follow after two rank and file comrades. Congratulations, Dan, and also Kerry. Very, very well done, mate. Look, it's nothing. There is nothing nothing wrong with saying that we're here to support Aussie jobs. The fact is that Aussie jobs are getting destroyed. They come after the seafarers. The next is going to be the wharfies. We've experienced it in the construction industry, and 9 times out of 10, these workers that are brought over here, forget about turning back the boats. They're coming by the thousands in the aeroplanes every day, but these workers are brought here, exploited to the hilt, even to the fact you see deaths in the industry. Just recently you would have seen with the high winds a worker was killed, and a young 19-year-old who come from overseas was working on another site. He was on life support. He's just come out of an induced coma. The likelihood is he'll never work again. He was here on a student visa, working, cash in hand, but getting paid peanuts. No insurance is in place, and now the Aussie taxpayer is going to fit the bill for the whole fact of him being in hospital for his medical expenses. And the fact is, this is going on consistently right around this country. We see it consistently in the construction industry. We see workers coming from overseas constantly being exploited right to the very bone of what you see, but not only exploited in terms of their wages, but also not only their conditions, but in terms of where workers are getting severely injured or killed in our industry. The fact is, we've got to stand up and support seafarers and their jobs, because they are being replaced
by cheap overseas labour that are being exploited. This is not about having a racial connotation towards workers coming from overseas. This is all about protecting families in Australia and making sure that the young ones, as well as the older workers, are getting their decent line of employment until they retire. The facts are, that's not what we're seeing. This rotten government, Turnbull, he then brings about legislation to try and pamper the unions and try and bring the unions to their knees. The same with the ABCC. That old form of legislation, the code that he's introduced, the fact is, construction workers now, if they stop work because there's been a death on a site, they can be fined and they can be prosecuted. That's the fact of it. They can be prosecuted and fined for that. We've seen over the last few weeks cranes falling over. We've seen walls falling over and workers being killed. We're going to see a continuation of it. It's increased dramatically in the amount of deaths and workers that have got disabilities as a fact of a workplace injury. We're going to continue to see it. We're also going to see it on the waterfront as well. We're going to see it with seafarers. We're going to see these workers that haven't had no form of training, that are coming from overseas, being injured at work, killed and exploited. The fact is, it's going to continue. We need to stand up. We need to continue to have these rallies. We need to make sure that we're at the forefront and the trade union movement's at the forefront and taking workers forward. We need to take on this government, and we're going to do it. We're going to stand side by side with the MUA, but I think the rest of the trade union movement that are here today, they need to be congratulated. And just one thing before I finish, I'd like to congratulate my own retired members that are here today, who are also supporting the cause. They're here today as well. But we need to make sure we continue the fight, comrades. I think it's a very, very good turnout. Let's be back here again in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael.
The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated.
Not sure when you're going to stop. All right, so comrades, up next we have, just lost him, the MUA Assistant National Secretary, behind me, don't do that, Warren Smith.
Thanks, comrades. It's such an important rally, and it's important that we continue to struggle in the streets and we continue to build a movement. The solutions to our problems are political solutions, and that's why Malcolm Turnbull is being targeted here today. It's the policies of this government that have turned around Australian industry completely in the interests of the manufacturers and the big bosses. Workers have been placed second, thrown on the scrap heap and forced into completely unreasonable, unsustainable and absolutely impossible competition. Why should an Australian seafarer be forced to compete with the most exploited third world labour? Now yes, they shouldn't be exploited. No worker should be exploited to that extreme level. But the bottom line for us is, do we lift people up or do we participate in the race to the bottom? And we lift people up. We lift people up and we lift ourselves up. And that requires in this country political change. You cannot have the system that we have where you open up markets to pure market forces, to money, to big corporations. It cannot go on. It's unsustainable, and what we have seen is industry after industry die in this country. On top of that, we're going to see what industries we have left suffer further automation, which will inevitably be used to impact working people. We need to change the system, and we need to change the rules. And the ACTU campaign about changing the rules is fundamentally important for us, because it's about seafarers and about every other worker and about providing the rights and the capacity for us to stand up and fight, to have the tools and not be held back by this rotten, unfair Fair Work Act, which holds workers back and stops and prevents us having the capacity to feed our families and give our kids a better life. That's what we're fighting for, comrades. And we've got to get rid of this government. We've got to get to a situation where it's not a crime and it's not a dirty word to to talk about protectionist policy for our industries. That's what we want. That's what we demand of any government that comes into this country. We will continue to demand it off these bunch of right-wing neoliberal turds. We probably won't get it, but we will have to crank up the struggle. Crank up the struggle and make it known to any incoming government. They must address the problem of the Australian working class, and that is provide us jobs, provide us industries, and protect us like government should do. Thanks, comrades.
Thank you. Up next is a very good friend of ours, Arthur Rorris from the South Coast Labor Council. Thanks for coming along, Arthur.
Thank you, Mish. Comrades, what a great sight it is to see you all today outside the Prime Minister's office. Greetings, solidarity from the South Coast, from Wollongong, from Port Kembla, everyone from the steel workers, the coal miners, and I see a lot of our seafarers and MUA people here today. That bit better, is it? Okay. All right, so the first thing I wanted to say to you is that when it comes down to it, you've got to give him this. This Prime Minister and his government actually does have some connection with flag of convenience. We've got a flag of convenience government here. They're a flag of convenience government. They don't even know whose citizenship they've got half the time. Of course they're on side. They understand how hard it is. They understand the problem. They're a flag of convenience mob. I was jokingly saying to a comrade the other day, we're going to have to call them the fuckers from now on. We'll have to go to Canberra to meet them. And putting that aside, this mob have gone so far against the interest of the working Australian population that they have now given up the ghost on even trying to say that it's fair. They now stare you in the eyes and say that's life. They don't bother explaining. They don't bother equivocating. They don't bother anymore. They say that is life, suck it up, you're entitled to nothing. And every time that they say that, and every time that they try and divide us, and every time that they use every weapon at their disposal, they're somehow shocked that every opinion poll in the country says that the country doesn't buy it. We don't agree. We don't think that our purpose on this earth is to make money for multinational corporations. How hard is it for that mob to understand this? We have rights, and one of them is the right to work, to earn money, to put bread on the table, to educate our children, to have health care, and to have the basic things in life that everyone else and previous generations have fought and struggled so hard for. But as our previous speakers have said, what this mob have done is they've sought to change the rules. They came up with it first, comrades, and they've been working very hard now for decades to stack the rules up in favour of their masters, those big multinational corporations. So I ask you, as seafarers, nurses, teachers and others who are here, how fair is it when big business, when capital in this country, the biggest fish of all, can strike at will? They can strike at dead of night and take seafarers off ships. They can strike and lift billions of dollars out of this country and send workers destitute and out of jobs. They can strike with impunity without any recourse at all from government, and they say that's globalisation. They can strike any time they like, and it's about time we, the workers, were again taking the initiative to strike when and where we desire as free workers. We need to understand one thing, and I know that you all do, but we need to put it simply so that our comrades and friends, the working people of this country, get it very, very clearly. The thing that differentiates a free worker from a slave is the ability to withdraw your labour. Because if you don't have that, what you have by definition is the ability of someone else being able to force you, to coerce you to work, to force you against your will, to take sanctions, to use all the legal sanctions, to bankrupt you if you decide to exercise your right to withdraw your labour. Is that a democracy or is that a dictatorship? Dictatorship. If it's a dictatorship, we owe it not just to ourselves, but to everybody else in this country to fight and fight hard and never give it away. It is not for them to take. Human rights cannot be legislated against in our book. We've never given away the right to strike. We will strike when and where we choose. And we will do so in the interests of our people. They'll do it in the interests of the corporations. Let me leave you with this, comrades. We've been spending a lot of time with young people and the exploitation of young people. I'm sure you've seen that in the media. Pathetic tales of $5 and $6 an hour, cash in hand employment with no workers' compensation or what have you. And that's happening to our kids right now. For the last few weeks, I've also been travelling to the schools to speak to their parents, the P&Cs and others. And you know what really upsets me? Is that once upon a time we were able to say you can do whatever you like. To your sons and your daughters, you can be a seafarer, you can be a steel worker, you can be a teacher, you could be whatever you wanted to do as long as you fought for it, as long as you studied for it, and this country would support you in that effort. How sad it is that every year we've got to strike an occupation off the list that our kids can actually do when they grow up. Is this the Australia that we fought for? No. Is this the Australia that our forebears fought for? No. If it's not, then for Christ's sake, we're not going to let them get away with it and take the Australia that we know and the Australia we want to build, and that is an Australia by, for and of the working class. Yeah. Thank you.
The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated.
Had plenty of tweets from the community going past, so there's a few people on our side, including the weather gods. They're obviously union members. We've had some pretty shitty weather lately, but it's certainly turned it on for us today. I also want to thank the members of the Maritime Union of Australia at Newcastle Branch and Port Kembla Branch who travelled up today, including many out-of-work seafarers, and Craig from the CSL Melbourne's here as well. So, but next, without further ado, put a bit of gender balance into it. I'd like to invite Alison Rudman and Nissa Parsons from the RTBU. Bit of an obstacle course there. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name's Nissa Parsons and I'm a proud RTBU member. We're here to show our support for the MUA members because attacks on jobs hurt us all. Our members' jobs are also under attack. The ABCC is trying to cut hard-won conditions for people who work on track.
Shame!
The New South Wales Transport Minister wants to sell off our buses.
Shame!
Rail workers everywhere are being asked to do more with less.
Shame!
We know that we only win when we stand up and fight back together. So that's why we are here, to show solidarity and to say that wherever you work, stand up and fight back.
Stand up, stand up, fight back. Stand up, fight back. Stand up, fight back. Stand up, fight back.
Thanks, sisters. That was great. We have just a couple more to go. Paul Keating, the Deputy Branch Secretary of the MUA Sydney Branch.
Thanks, comrade. Comrades, firstly, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we meet here today and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. This is stolen land, and we should never forget, and justice hasn't been afforded to the First Nations of this country. Comrades, we have a government headed by this Turnbull, this Malcolm Turnbull, who not only is morally bankrupt in his agenda to remove the right of workers to organise and work in their own industry, our seafarers working on their own coast, but it's got to be a criminal bankruptcy in it. Just because the laws aren't designed whereby that is criminal doesn't make it any less. We have a government that speaks for the ruling class. We have a government that speaks for big business, those that profiteer from our labour, the people of this country, the working class. And what we need to do, because we can't rely on this political system
to deliver for us, we need to organise and strike. We need to organise in our communities and withdraw our labour in every industry. There is no other way forward but to build our political class consciousness and our loyalty to our own. Because they won't do it. The coppers here, they're here designed to prop the system up. They're not here to protect the community. How do I know? Because I've got to tell you, we've had our seafarers dragged off the vessels that they were lawfully on, ordered by state governments and delivered by the police force on them. Forced. But let's understand that when we say we're going to not accept unjust laws, when we say to each other we're going to defy them laws that enslave us, then we are free. We need to withdraw our labour and organise in every industry. We need to be going down to every job, organising the platform to that. And can it be done? Well, our history says it can. The history of the working class across the world, we have determined over history when to throw out the ruling class. And now's the time that we start building that position again. Yeah. Now's the time that those in postcodes that live here should be fearful of the working class, because you're robbing our right to work. You're robbing us of our dignity, because there's no dignity without work. And we've got seafarers, the most qualified workers in this industry across the world, that can't even work on their coastline. Can't. We need to be the voice, the working class across all our communities, and say, you know what? Well, it ain't just about them, but we've got to fight for them. It's about the 700,000 young people, men and women, migrant workers that are going to have their penalty rates reduced and then enslaved. Where does that money go? It goes to the profits of the ruling class, the big end of town. So now, where we make our stand is not just to remove these criminals like Turnbull and his crowd of shit, but it's about real change, change for our communities, real change where collectivism is a right, where our right to organise, where laws are removed or defied when they're unjust. So, comrades, let's make that fight now, and let's fight until we win.
That's not to mention it's the trifecta, it's the three pools. So Paul Garrett, the Assistant Branch Secretary of MUA.
Thank you, and I'd like to acknowledge the land on which we meet. I'd also like to acknowledge every worker that's here today, every unemployed worker that's here today, everyone who's on social media watching this, both in New South Wales, around Australia, and I've also seen around the world. Thank you for being part of this protest today against the Prime Minister, who's one of the biggest bullshit artists we've ever seen. A Prime Minister who spent $1 million of his own money to be the Prime Minister. A Prime Minister who's got $170 million in the Cayman Islands. $170 million in the Cayman Islands. A Prime Minister that went over to America to suck hole to President Trump after Trump hung up on him. A Prime Minister who forgets that even in America they have rights. The seafarers there have the Jones Act. They have American seafarers on American ships that are American crewed and American built. But our bullshit artist Prime Minister can't work that out for himself. He's missing in action. And you might have seen the US, the Navy yesterday. The USS John McCain had that terrible accident with sailors still missing. And it's an absolute tragedy. And what ship hit it? The Aldic NC. You've probably never heard that before. But you would have heard of it 2 years ago. Because 2 years ago, she was called the Tandara Spirit. 2 years ago, she was down in Port Phillip Bay. 2 years ago, 38 crew members lost their job. When this government, this Prime Minister, that reprehensible swine Michaela Cash and all the rest of the cronies were missing in action. When they demanded to remove our labour off the ship and replace the ship with labour, and they're workers. They are workers doing their best, but absolutely exploited on $2 an hour. And this all happened under this Prime Minister's watch. This bloke's such a dope, he can't even work out his own Deputy Prime Minister's a Kiwi. It's now time to make a stance, as it's always time for workers to make a stance. You should all be proud of standing here today. You should all be proud to stand up for Australian seafarers' jobs. Woo! We have the 4th largest shipping task in the world. 98% of our cargo comes from overseas on ships. We should be crewing those damn ships. It should be our workers on board those ships, transiting them around the coast, transiting them around the world. They should be our jobs, and it's time to get them back. Congratulations, everyone, for getting here today.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to finish up now. I just want to say thanks for letting me be your MC, because Paul Macklin is going to finish the rally, and we will get a group photo just before you all go. I want to say thank you so much to everyone that has come out today. I know you guys are always with us. We've got senior officials of unions to rank and file. I just think it's awesome. It's been a great event, and before we go, I just wanted to finish on what I was saying before about the Red Ensign. When we did a press release for this rally today, we're talking about the merchant banker, and all I could think of is that we don't want merchant bankers, we want merchant tankers. So without further ado, Paul Macklin, the Sydney Branch Official Secretary.
Thanks, comrades. Well, I've got to say how proud I am as the Sydney Branch Secretary of the Maritime Union of Australia to not just see MUA members here from Sydney, but also from around this massive state of ours, and also trade unionists from many other unions that are here to support us, but also to fight against Turnbull, against the attacks and assaults against you that have been unleashed by this criminal, rotten, filthy government headed by this bloke. This bloke talks about security so often, doesn't he? Always talking about security. But have a look at this building. This bloke would have to be the most insecure bloke I've ever seen. His officers are in a big giant dick. Can you believe it? How phallic is this building? He's running around denying people who love each other the right to marry, and yet he's in that big edifice. Very surprising. I'm in a bit of shock, actually. I was looking at it from down there thinking, how insecure is this bloke? And they often are, aren't they, the ruling class? They talk about security so much, but they're in fact insecure. They're insecure because they know they're wrong. They're like a liar that's under the big spotlight, when they don't know what to say and they're umming and ahhing and they talk about everything else but themselves, because they know they are wrong. We know we are right. And that is not demonstrated more so than which side of this ugly building we're on. On the outside of this building, we have workers, we have nurses, we have teachers, we have wharfies and port workers and seafarers. We have truck drivers, we have construction workers, we have social workers. And on that side, we have the representative of the ruling class in a suburb as rich as this, as if he's suggesting to us all, if only you had more money, you wouldn't be out here protesting. In one of the wealthiest areas of the country, saying to us as unemployed workers that we do not have the right to a job in our own country. These are the things that are so frightfully wrong, and why we see him as so out of touch, as his whole government is out of touch, and most of the time the whole parliament is out of touch. If they don't want to represent all of the things that we believe in as a union movement, and they don't, then I see no reason for us to comply with any law that they come up with. Because it has not been through compliance that we have won our rights. It has not been through compliance that we've even been able to win conditions. It's been through defiance. And defiance is a uniquely working class thing. Certainly for the last few hundred years, since capitalism has put its claws into each and every one of us and made us the slave that each and every one of us know that we are. We've got to do much more than protest. Today's actions are not an end of themselves. We are not going to change this government by our activities today. But what today represents is an opportunity for trade unionists to understand that we do have power, we do have dignity, and we have incredible strength. The only reason they need to legislate away your rights is because that they know if you fulfil them, you would defeat them. We don't need the right to strike, we just need to strike. And no police officer is big enough or ugly enough to defeat us. No government, whether it's state or federal, is big enough or ugly enough to stop us. When we unleash the power that is in each and every one of our hearts to achieve the justice that we know we deserve, we will overthrow this rotten system and we will have dignity, justice, respect and decency. I'm never going to allow a rotten politician, as gutless as this one is, to suggest that outsiders and foreigners are our enemy. A foreign seafarer working for $1.25 an hour is not the enemy of the Australian working class. They are not the enemy of the Australian seafarer. The rotten employer that puts them on those ships of shame along our coast and allows them to live in poverty are the criminals and are our enemies, and they fit inside that rotten building. Yes. Are we going to fight them? Yes. Are we going to fight them? Yes. Are we going to change the rules? Yes. Are we going to fight? Yes. Are we going to win? Yes. Up the union movement! Up the union movement! Up the union movement! Up the union movement! Up solidarity! Up solidarity! Down the human top hat! 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 Solidarity! Solidarity! Say it like you mean it! Solidarity! Solidarity!
Okay, here we are. We're just going to do one chant. We'll do it 3 times. I just want you to repeat after me, right? Malcolm Turnbull is his name. Malcolm Turnbull is his name. Destroying seafarers is his game. Destroying seafarers is his game. Cashers in the caper too. Cashers in the caper too. Both of them would make a spew. Both of them would make a spew. We'll fight the bastards all the way. We'll fight the bastards all the way. Australian seafarers here to stay. Australian seafarers here to stay. Malcolm Turnbull is his name. Malcolm Turnbull is his name. Busting unions is his game. Busting unions is his game. Cashers in the caper too. Cashers in the caper too. Both of them would make a spew. Both of them would make a spew. We'll fight the bastards all the way. We'll fight the bastards all the way. MUA here to stay. MUA here to stay. Good on your power to use.